Buenas tardes, muchas gracias por acompañarnos en esta conversación muy esperada para nosotros en el aniversario de Sonamaco. Nos acompañan Magnolia de la Garza, Magnolia de la Garza es directora ejecutiva de Colección Isabel y Agustín Coppel. Karen Grimson, curadora y directora del programa cultural Craig Robinson Collection. Therese Möllenhoff, directora de Canica Art Collection, y nos acompaña Ana Sokoloff moderando, socia fundadora de Sokoloff Associates. La charla va a ser en inglés principalmente, pero bueno, cualquiera que tenga alguna duda, también tenemos personas que hablan español y bueno, ellas van a hablar sobre colecciones privadas, diálogos públicos. Un placer tenerlas aquí. Thank you for being here. Les...
Gracias. Gracias especialmente a Eloisa por haber organizado for organizing this talk. To Dire Lalazo also from the Sonamaco equipo, the Sonamaco team in general. Shout out to Sonamaco 20 years. Bravo. And especially to Celica Garcia, that we all know is our favorite art director for fairs. I'm very honored to be here today with Magnolia La Garza, with Karen, and of course with Therese, who is the one that comes from further away, probably. But we're delighted to be here. They're extraordinary women, and I think that we will be having a very interesting conversation between ourselves, where I will throw a few themes, and then they will discuss it from the perspective of their own collections. I find it extraordinarily interesting when people introduce themselves and they have very short time to do so. So I have given them each between 3 to 5 minutes maximum to introduce themselves and the collection that they work with. And then after that, we will have the conversation. And I do think that it's going to be a wonderful exchange of ideas because of the difference of background, geographies, ecosystems, and even egos of the people running them and owning them. So we will hope to delve into that, and then of course touch ideas about the art market, ideas about change in social responsibility, and hopefully that will enrich the conversation between these three wonderful women. So I'm going to start, with the furthest away as our foreign guest to introduce herself. I'm going to set my time watch, and I will tell you when you can start. You can start anytime.
So hello, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Therese Möllenhoff, and I'm the director and chief curator of a Norwegian private art collection called Canica. It is one of the largest private collections in the Nordic region, and it comprises about 2,000 works of art. It's a collection that started out as a personal collection of the owner of Canica, who is Stein Erik Hagen, a Norwegian businessman.
How slowly for us? So the pronunciation slowly for us.
Erik Hagen is the owner of Canica, and Canica is the family office of the Hagen family. It's a Norwegian family. And well, the collection started as a personal collection, buying works for his house, for his home. It very quickly became professionalized and became a private collection that is envisioned as a sort of museum parallel collection. So instead of it being based on like the personal taste of what you want to have at home, it was decided around the year 2000 to build a collection that would have more of a cultural significance and that would be focused on the region in where we are based, which is the Nordic countries and Europe, and to build it as it was a museum collection. The reason for this is that a lot of the public museums did not have the acquisitions to buy the art and the art historical works of our region. And the museum, the collection was envisioned as sort of a museum parallel and complementary to to the public museums. So instead of keeping everything at home or in storage, we started a collaboration with several public museums in our region and place works into the public collections. So at the moment, we have works in Oslo at the Munch Museum, Edvard Munch, the famous painter of the Scream. We have works at the National Gallery in Denmark, in Copenhagen. We have works at the Bergen Art Museum, also in Norway, and we have works at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And in all of these museums, we take works from our collection that we acquire and then place them in dialogue with what is in the public collections. In addition to this, we also work a lot with supporting exhibition programs, not only for like the modern art that we collect, but for emerging contemporary artists. So we sponsor an exhibition series at the Munch Museum called Solo Oslo, which is awarded to young Oslo-based artists. And the intention of this is to cultivate the next generation of Nordic artists, so that we, in a way, preserve the history of Nordic modern art and then help support the development of new Nordic artists.
You're in time, 3:10. But I'm going to give you one more minute to talk about your background.
So my background is I'm an art historian, specialized in Edvard Munch and Nordic modern art, but I also worked in contemporary emerging art. So for 12 years, I was a senior curator at an international museum called the Astrup Fearnley Museum in Oslo, where I worked specifically with American contemporary art. And then I took over as director of the Canica Collection two and a half years ago.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I know that we should continue with another foreigner, but I am going to break the rules of hospitality and continue with Magnolia. And let me just stop the stopwatch and restart it. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Magnolia de la Garza, and in the last 9 years, I have been working with the Isabel and Agustín Coppel collection, better known as the Coppel collection. It's a private collection with the name of a company, but it's not a corporative collection. They started to collect back in the 90s. I think that the first work they acquired was like 1993 with modern Mexican art. And the history, like behind the collection, they wanted to create a collection of Mexican modern artists. But then suddenly they start to travel and to look around, and they realized that there was something happening that was not reflected in Mexico at the time. So they start to buy also international art, and I think that's important because the base of the collection is not a specific focus, not in Latin America, not in Mexico, but it's larger. And another important aspect is that the collector never wanted to have like very specific line of collecting. I know there's collectors that always focus on like very young artists, women artists, or Latin American artists, and it's not the case. So I think the collection is quite rich because of that, because we didn't follow just one path. And the other important aspect is that the collectors quite soon realized that in first thing they didn't wanted to open a private museum, but they wanted to be like engaged in the public art, scene. So the first, the most public project of the collection is the Botanical Garden in Culiacan. That even before to have really a curator for that project, they start to acquire works to be displayed in this botanical garden that was like also a new project for Culiacan back in the 2000s. Then they hire a curator because the collection doesn't have a curator. They always have like people around. They have me, they have a previous director, but never wanted to hire like a curator because that's something very personal for them. And they don't want like somebody like telling them what to buy. We can advise them, but it's like we don't make the decision for them. But the Botanical Garden was the only project that has been curated. It's Patrick Charpenet that was in charge, not since the beginning, but really like that transform the whole project. And it's still an ongoing project. We are still building pieces that started in conversation with the artists like 15 years ago. But it's like we are slow, but we are like arriving at some point. The goal is never like to see everything together, but just follow the process. But at the same time, like also back in 2006, they decide to open the collection as a non-profit that in Mexico would be like a Asociación Civil, in order just to understand the collection from a public sphere, to generate projects with the collection itself. So the first exhibition was curated by Tatiana Pimentel, now the director of the Marco Museum in Monterrey. And at the time, they didn't feel confident just to put their name, so they just had the title. Even if whole Culiacan, that was the first venue, knew that they were the collectors behind it, was like announced as a private collection. And since that specific moment, they engage this relation with very different institutions in Mexico and abroad, just to create and produce exhibitions with the collection as the core, but in institutions like that were not like their own institutions. So since then, we created more than 10 projects. We exhibit in very different museums. Mexico City was one of the venues, but it's not important for the collection being here because Mexico City has a very big offer, and the idea was like just to arrive to very different publics. So we have been in Culiacan, of course, Puebla, Guadalajara, Monterrey, but San Luis Potosí, you name it, you know?
And the last few 1 minute about yourself.
Before joining the collection, I was working at the Tamayo Museum as a part of the curatorial team. So I knew the art scene, and I met the former director of the collection because of that. Because one thing I think is important to say that the collectors, besides their own interest in the collection, they are part of the board of different institutions in Mexico and also abroad.
Indeed. And of course, last but not least, we have Karen Grimson with the Craig Robbins collection in Miami, and you will have, of course, your
Ready, set, go.
ready to
Thank you, Ana. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. My name is Karen Grimson. I'm an art historian, originally from Argentina, based now in Miami.
The other way around.
Yeah. I'm based in Miami now, where I have a twofold job. I'm the curator of Craig Robbins' collection. Craig is the developer of a neighborhood called the Miami Design District. His collection is exhibited in a building in the Design District, which I'll show you some images of. These are our offices. We have 3 floors, 2 exhibition floors, and the third one is storage. I think the question that I had most front of mind after Ana's invitation to be part of this talk was, how can private collections and to what extent can we have a public purpose? So there are ways in which Craig's private collection informs the public art program of the Miami Design District. And I'll show you now a few examples of artists who are collected, for instance, Zaha Hadid, and from the relationship between the collector and the artist, different commissions have taken place in the last almost 20 years since the Design District has been under development. Zaha Hadid has the bench in our lobby in the building where the collection is displayed. And she has a public sculpture called Elastica in the Moore building, which is a historical building, 100 years old. The next artist is Urs Fischer, who Craig has collected in depth. And in 2017, we invited Urs to do a public piece in the Design District. The next one is Samuel Ross, a young British designer who we've been collecting for the last 2 years. And now, more recently, in December of last year, we invited Samuel to do a series of sculptural benches throughout the design district. So these pieces function as commissions, and they're also artists who are represented inside the space where the collection is on view. The next one, I think I have one more, the spectacular Bisa Butler with a monumental quilt on the left, which you could see in the first image I showed in the lobby of the collection. We're working with Bisa to do the cycling jersey for a fundraiser that the Miami Design District participates in annually. And so Bisa is the artist who the team will be featuring as we ride and raise funds for cancer research. And then just a little more about the collection. The next slide shows you the narrative of the rotation that we do once a year, usually right before Miami Art Basel, which is our most public-facing moment. This is an exhibition that tells the story of how Craig has been collecting for the last 40 years. And the argument is that he has intuitively been favoring two languages most strongly. One is figuration, and it starts with these prints by Goya. These are the earliest prints in the collection, and they were also the first works that were acquired into the collection. So they're almost over 100 years earlier than anything else that was acquired, but they sort of set the tone for the following artists who have been working in figuration. Nicole Eisenman, Amanda Ba, Celeste Dupuis-Spencer, Jill Mulady. These are all recent acquisitions. And the second language that has been collected in depth is conceptualism. So conceptualism begins with this Duchamp piece, which is 3 standard stoppages and an edition piece. And it continues into John Baldessari, Richard Tuttle, and John Outerbridge, which are sort of situate the North American legacy of the impact of Duchamp. Joseph Beuys, Aconchi, William Wegman and Berman and Alighiero Boetti are just some examples of the collection display that we have on view. So you're welcome to visit us in Miami. We obviously don't function as a public exhibition space because we don't have the infrastructure to manage the flow of visitors. Also, the space where we have the collection displayed is an office space. So obviously there's a lot of things happening at the same time. But anyone who comes to the collection is welcome to do a self-tour. There is a QR code so everyone knows what works they're visiting. And we're happy to have visitors and tours walk through anytime.
Thank you very much. Exactly 5:03 minutes. So I'm going to put my stopwatch away because now we're going to have a completely different format. And I want to start before we go into other issues with something that you mentioned, which is Karen, you said that the collection had started around, and the first work that was purchased was the Goya Caprichos, which is an amazing work, and it has informed, hence, a lot of the collection. I understand from what I've read about the Canica collection that the piece that has become as well that sort of chess piece that is the key piece is the Asger John that you bought not that long ago, in fact. But that Asger John is one of the artists that you collect in depth and has informed a lot of what has happened around the collection and how you have then developed all the strategies that you have developed. Magnolia, which is that piece in the Coppel collection?
That piece is a Gary Hill piece, Learning Curve. That was the first contemporary international artwork that they acquired. And I think that it's like a breaking point. Just imagine being somebody that is buying painting, photography, maybe a sculpture or two, and then you acquire this big piece that is like a video installation, that is not like something that you just can place in your home. And that was in storage for like almost 15 years, that we exhibited for the first time in Madrid in 2017 in a show that I co-curated. But was like, ago. No, that was the first time also that I saw it in person. But for me, it's like that breaking point of being someone that is interested in acquiring art and somebody that just became a collector.
So going back to, I'm going to go back to Therese and maybe ask her to elaborate a little bit about the collecting strategy of having focused on one artist and how you go and continue collaborating with the museums, and to what extent you actually collaborate from within the collection with the museums, the museum curators, and then move our way back to the other public situations. I know that Karen's situations are the different, and Magnolia's is also very different.
Yes, so the piece that you mentioned is a major painting by a Danish artist called Asger Jorn, who's one of the founders of the Cobra art movement. The Cobra art movement was very short-lived. It was only between 1948 and 1951, but of course the artists of that generation were very influential in developing abstract art in Europe. And this is an artist that is very present in our collection, not only this one single piece, which is on display at the National Gallery in Denmark, but in total by this artist, Asger Jorn, we have more than 300 works. So some of the shows that we have curated in collaborations with museums across both in Germany, in Denmark, and in Norway have been single shows of this one artist. But what we try to do in the collection is that the collection strategy is very research-based and delves into like a very specific art historical focus. So starting with an artist like this, we try to build a context, the curatorial context around the collection, and try to envision it as a museum collection and as a museum exhibition. So when I took over the collection, I tried to identify, if I were to make this collection into an exhibition with this specific theme, what is missing? Which works would I like to, have in addition to build a comprehensive context that is art historically based? And so one of the things that I work with is to enhancing the sort of like the blind spots of the collection, and try to look into what are the artists, especially women artists, that were overlooked in this time and that are very relevant, and to sort of cultivate and focus on that, and not only in getting works for the collection, but also supporting research within the institutions, to fund exhibition program, and to involve ourselves in sort of building the knowledge of that generation and making it more comprehensive, not only for our collection and our works, but for the entire sort of art historical field.
And before we give the microphone to Karen, what is the involvement of the owner of the collection in these processes?
Oh, so the collection as it is now is quite professionalized, and it's always, since the past 24 years, been led by an art historical director. And our owner is involved in sort of the budget, how much money we spend on each work. Everything is checked with the owner, but it's not, the pieces that we buy is not based on I like this or I like that. So it's based on like an art historical argument, and then that is how we make the decisions. So our owner is involved in the decisions, but the choices for acquisitions are research-based and art historically focused.
Thank you.
She brings up such an interesting situation in a private collection where the personal isn't private, like you were saying earlier, right? Like his personal taste doesn't dictate the collection. In my case,
They go there.
the private collection I curate is entirely determined by the personal taste and intuition and eye and sort of,
And may I dare say relationships with the artist in some cases?
Totally, yeah. For instance, John Baldessari was a great friend of Craig's, and Craig ended up amassing over 50 pieces by John. So it's a very different way of carrying forward a collection. It's a very powerful one as well. I think it's more dictated by the principle of pleasure. What things do I like to live with? Especially new acquisitions, Craig will want to have on the wall right away to make sure he develops a relationship with a piece. And this works, throughout the time, can also be deaccession. Sometimes we work a lot deaccessioning things from the collection and sort of shaping it into making sure that that personal taste is not fixed, right? We know that people change with time. We know our tastes and our opinions change. And the collection that Craig has is a reflection of that. So it evolves.
And what would happen to the public works? Do they also change?
The public art pieces are either permanent or temporary. The permanent ones, for instance, are the ones that are informed by the collection. For example, there's a Buckminster Fuller dome that is a piece in Craig's collection that will never go anywhere. The temporary pieces are the murals, the installations that we do with the Fair Design Miami, where every December we do, instead of a holiday commission, we bring in a new designer to do installations throughout the district. They're there for 3 or 4 months. So some things are temporary and they change all the time. And the most permanent, which are around 10 or 15 works, are there for good.
Can you tell us a little bit of what you told us while we were having a quick bite about the Baldessari project that you're working with and the programming that you do for the Art Miami district?
Sure. The design district is an 18-block neighborhood in Miami. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it. It's retail-based, but it's also important to everyone, to the partners, that there is an equal amount of culture that attracts people who are not necessarily coming here to shop. So the spaces around the neighborhood become vacant. Every now and then there's a tenant changeover. And whenever there's a space in between or a space isn't leased, which has been less and less the case because the neighborhood has been growing so much, we do exhibitions in those spaces, which could be anywhere from a gallery pop-up or a local artist who wants to do their own show, or an exhibition I curate, or we bring in local curators to do their own thing. So the design district remains a platform for local artists. And then the project you mentioned of the Baldessari exhibition is an idea that we're working on with a museum in Buenos Aires to send over a collection, the entire collection of Baldessari works that Craig has, which covers 6 decades of his career, to produce an exhibition of his work in Argentina, where his work has never been shown in depth. I think only Colombia had an exhibition of videos by Baldessari, but in Latin America as a region, or South America, I should say, Baldessari hasn't been shown in depth. So in that case, the model that we're exploring is a partnership with a museum that would benefit both. And we're sort of designing sort of the economic model that we will pursue in order for it to be beneficial for both, because obviously the possibilities in Miami and Buenos Aires are very different.
That is going to lead us to the next idea of costs. But before, we want to hear from Magnolia, of course. Always want to hear from Magnolia.
Well, I think that at the point you have the name of the collector in the collection, that is your case, it becomes not just private, but personal. And it's the case of the Isabel and Agustín Coppel collection, is their own taste that is reflected in the collection, and their idea of art and the art community in general. But the difference is, like, Agustín is a very private person and he keeps his distance of artists in general. He has like 2 or 3 artists that is like close to him as friends, but he always tried to keep that distance from the person and the work. In a way, it's funny that. But in the way that it works as a collection, it's like he's like the president of this association. And every year I need to present him the projects, but are my projects. Me and my team just build like, we wanted to do something. And we discussed with him the budget. He just like, okay, just less here, more here. And that gives us a lot of freedom in terms of programming. That's a really nice thing, because in the last years, I'm just the director of these collections since 2019. Before, I was a deputy director. That was more the artistic part of the collection at the time. And I wanted to do the things in a very different way. The collection for the first exhibition we produce everything. And we arrive with the institution with the whole package, and a little bit like an alien just arrive there and colonize a little bit the museum for 3 months or 6 months. And because of my background as a curator in an institution, I didn't want to follow the same path. So the projects that I generated are always in a very close relation with the institution. Just deciding, even the curator, 2 years ago, we opened an exhibition focused on the time-based media part of the collection at the Laboratorio de Arte Alameda with Lucía San Román. And when we start the conversation, we decided together which curator would be great for the institution, to whom we could work together, not just from the collection side.
When you do those projects, do you sometimes bring in works on loan from other institutions or collections, or it's always based on?
It's always been with works from the collection. It's like we have a few works that we want to display, and if it's the case, but it's a decision always by the curator that we invited, that they want a piece that is not part of the collection, we are always open to bring it alone. But it's more like a decision of the curator than imposition of the museum or one. That really responds to the curatorial project. So since then, with this project, we invited Ruth Esteves to create this amazing project. And then I was having this very strange conversation with Mario Garcia Torres, the artist, that the first approach was invited him to do a project with the collection. And it ended to be a more performatic work that was a talk show. Really, was like dancer, like a sports section, like a music section, a monologue, was and then was the different. We approached an institution here in Mexico City. There was Museo Experimental El Eco, because talking with Mario, we wanted not like the traditional exhibitions place, but a place more related with this performatic ideas. So we arrived with that, with Paola Santos Coy, that at the time was the director, but we really built the whole project around this space with Paola and with Mario, and I think it's always works better in that sense.
When you talk about all these exhibitions and activities that you all spearhead in your position, how do you work with the costs of those exhibitions, and how do you collaborate, or how?
I think that at the beginning of the collection absorbs everything. For the second exhibition of the collection that was started in Paris, we have the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the shipping. That was a lot. But at the moment, Mexico wanted to expand that part of being a contemporary country. That was and the collection was perfect for that. Where it was a political decision that was more related with the cultural. We didn't work with the Ministry of Culture, but Foreign Affairs. But mostly we cover everything. And then, time changed, and we start to create another kind of collaborations with institutions that even share costs of shipping, or insurance, or installation. And another thing that was important, for example, with this project at Laboratorio de Arte Alameda, that you are working with a public institution that with the Mexican context was suffering from all these cuts on the budget, and you just can demand the same things, or that being an equal partner, but also we didn't want to use the space, we didn't want to feel that we are rented or something. So which small gestures you can do to help the institution after the show. In that case was having the money. Instead of having a printed catalog, we created this microsite of the exhibition, because we thought that was better, showing moving image, just having that you can see the videos. So creating that, we also funded like the webpage of the museum to have an independent webpage from the Ministry of Culture. That didn't work. And also just to creating the museum display, we generate those structures that was like industrial shelves that we give it to them so they can still use it. And when you visit the museum, the temporary walls are based on those walls that we constructed.
That's amazing. So you go beyond the exhibition and funding. And Karen, how does that work with the Craig Robinson?
For costs. So Craig's collection is around 1,300 works of art and design. We have maybe 20% of that on view. And then we have anywhere between 200 and 300 works out on loan at any given time. So first, he's a very generous lender. In the case of specific artists that he has championed or collected in depth, who are having important moments in their careers, or maybe they're having, traveling exhibitions or a first retrospective. The case of Nicole Eisenman, who's now going to the MCA Chicago, or Rick Tiravanis in MoMA PS1. Very important moments for those artists, both of whom are very well represented in the collection. And Craig, early on, when they would take on commissions or presentations in biennials, he would underwrite their works. And now, when institutions come to the collection and request works on loan, we take on a very proactive response by suggesting that they borrow more, for instance. And then the costs of the shipping and the insurance of those loans are covered by the collection, which is, contrary to what happens any other time when a work is requested on loan. The museum will borrow it, put it under an insurance policy, cover the shipping costs. But in order for that artist to be more bolstered, or those loans to be more bolstered in their presentations, Craig will offer to cover the shipping costs. Absolutely. Totally. That and the return. So it's round trip. Yeah, it's double.
About, you work maybe it's interesting since you are our most exotic member of the group, but in a good way. Can you inform us a little bit about the region and how it works? Because for most of us, Scandinavia is a myth, a beautiful one, of course, full of snow and reindeer. But tell us a little bit more of how that works and how the collection, which is in Oslo, works with Copenhagen, and you even mentioned Amsterdam, which is a little bit further down. So, in how you cover costs and how you work with that.
In the Nordic countries, we have a very privileged system of public museums being almost fully financed by the state in terms of their operations. But on the contrary, the museums have very little acquisition budgets and funding for acquiring works. And this is sort of the situation in which a private collection like Canica can come in and contribute to the acquisitions and to place works within the public collections, making the collections more stronger, more relevant, and also sometimes maybe challenge the perspective of the art history that the museums are building. So for an example, in Scandinavia, a public museum will maybe have $100 million funded in operations, but for acquisitions, maybe $1 million. And in sort of the art world of today, you don't
get... Latin America would be fantastic anyway, but...
but that would be across, multiple disciplines. So there's a big discrepancy between what you have for running the museum and what you have for building the collection. So this tradition of the private collection engaging in the public museums, I think, has been fruitful in terms of our collection. And in that case, of course, all the acquisitions come from the collection, and then the sort of keeping of the work in terms of storage, exhibiting, etc., is done by the museums. In addition to this sort of collection collaborations, we are sponsors of multiple museums. Our major collaborator is the Munch Museum, and as I mentioned in my intro, we are collaborators and sponsors of a contemporary exhibition program, because both the Museum of Edvard Munch and the Museum of Van Gogh are like single artist museums. It's one artist, great, world recognized artist, and they donated a lot of their work to the States. In the case of Edvard Munch, to the municipality of Oslo, but that becomes, in a world of today, less relevant. You have to sort of challenge that sort of a very mono focus on single artists by doing something more different, by reflecting on them critically, by showing other artists, by showing how they can be relevant for artists of today. So this exhibition program that we work with, where we sponsor across 5 years, 6 solo exhibitions for emerging contemporary artists that are based in Oslo, but not necessarily Norwegian, is more of a program that we engaged in financially, that we support it, but we don't have like an instrumental relationship to the artist. So we don't collect the younger artists that are in this program. So there is no sort of benefit for the collection other than the sort of philanthropic purpose of supporting the development of a new generation. And in this case, we also support the publications, both in terms of the costs of the publication, but also with the sort of the research. And I spend some of my time as the director working as the editor of this publication series, because this was not possible for the museum to accommodate within their publications department. But for us, it was important because an exhibition is always temporal. So it only exists the 2-3 months that it's on view. If you see it, you see it. If you don't, it's sort of lost unless you put it into, the format of a book. So publications are very important for us.
And we know they are also very important for the Coppel collection. And apparently they're going to begin to be important for the Craig Robbins collection as we now delve into exhibitions in Argentina. So yes, tell us a little bit about your publication program. And then let's give Karen, and we only have 10 minutes. And I do want you to go into how you're all active collections. And so how you perceive the art market today and how you navigate it in today's world. And then we'll end with that and leave it to the people for...
Okay, first about the publications. For the collector, I think that he was not training in the arts. He came from a context that there was like no art context. So for him, the publication is a very important part of the exhibition. Just the last one exhibition, he allowed us to opening the exhibition without the catalog ready. And was an exception because I wanted to have installation views on the catalog. We think that the catalog is an extension of the exhibition that provides more information about the curatorial approach, but also about every single work, and has a different temporality. I mean, as Therese mentioned, the exhibition could be on view for 3 months or 6 months and then disappear. But the catalog gives you something else. And I think that especially with collections, it's important when we don't have an exhibition space. Publications works like a research tool for the future of what we did or makes part of that collection. And in relation with the art market, it's I think it changed a lot. I'm just in this part of the art market since I joined the collection as part of a public institution in Mexico. I was, of course, not related with, I came to art fairs, I went to galleries, but with a very different approach. And for me, it was like a new discover. For me, prizes were something for the insurance and that's it. Was like a whole new world. That is not against the institution. Is something that runs in parallel. I think that they're part of the same ecosystems, even with independent spaces. I think they are important, and it changed a lot. when I can see like the history of the collection back in the 90s. And I remember my dear Mireia Escalante, that was the
That came
mind.
from the market.
Yes, she came from the market, but she was fighting back 20 years ago, like really to explain these international galleries that was like a serious collector from Mexico. And I think that we can say today that galleries like understand that Mexico, Latin American region, it's important for the art market, not just in terms of amazing artists, but in terms like of collectors.
So I came to the collection in 2022. So it was already after the strongest impact of the pandemic on the market. I also had a newfound relationship with the market because coming from the museum, it was also prices were for insurance purposes. I now have a broader understanding of the market. I don't think it has changed the way we collect so much. It maybe impacted the frequency of acquisitions, but still, maybe, in 10 years ago, maybe we acquired over 20 works a year, and now we're acquiring closer to 10 or 12. So it's still very a slow-paced or moderately paced acquisition strategy. And we tend to stay away from the blue chip artists, blue chip galleries, because Craig's idea about investing in art is to also support artists when they're taking off and see where they go with their career. And some artists have, stopped producing work in their 40s and have taken different paths. And in those cases, those works are maybe potential donations to a museum. So it hasn't really impacted the quality of art that we acquire. If anything, I would say just the pace.
Well, we acquire works both in the secondary market through auctions and in the primary market, but we don't collect a lot of very emerging artists. So I think it's a privileged position to be in, that we don't have to buy at a certain price range before it doubles or triples. We have the privilege to be able to wait and see. And so in this segment of the market, I don't think we're as sort of sensitive towards the range. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and even one last question is, what do you think has been your biggest contribution to the collection since you started? I mean, both of you are a little bit younger to the collection, and I have already put some changes, Magnolia, as an artistic director as well. So I think that what do you think has been like the most important thing that you have sort of made part of the structure or the operational institutionalization of the collection?
The first thing, like more in the administrative field, just to work with the budget for the projects. Before me, they were very lucky and they just sent the bills. That was great, but was like doesn't work for an institution. So was the first step. A more long-term relations with institutions itself, and in their part of the collection, just put more attention to female artists, because I worked with a lot of amazing artists at the Tamayo Museum, and just to put that accent at the collection. That was like Leonora Antunes, Monica Sosnowska, Paulina Oloska. There were like some of the artists I work with, Vivian Suter. So, and I want them at the collection because I thought that makes sense. That was not a forced decision, and just this talk and decide like stop to buy. I mean, you can still buying Abraham Cruz Villegas or Gabriel Orozco or like Gunter Gerso, but there's like another amazing artist around.
I think the most important thing I ever did in my life probably was relocate the collection storage last year from a garage to a conditioned and climatized space that took 6 years of, 6 months of my life. It felt like 6 years. And yeah, it was phenomenal. It was so much fun. It took a huge team to do it. We recatalogued everything, and it gave us new perspectives on the collection. So the collection display that we have on now is a little bit informed by that retrospective look on how the collection has been shaped and where it has gone over 40 years. And then I think in terms of the curatorial, more, let's say, exhibition-focused side, it's just finding ways to insert certain artists who maybe would have not been displayed because they were acquired a long time ago, or they're not perceived as, having been purchased at the last Art Basel, or proposing certain dialogues with unexpected artists that are most of the time artists from Latin America or women artists that we may not have been thinking about in the last year of acquisitions. So it's also, thinking about the collection as a wholesome living
We have 1
thing.
minute for Therese.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Well, in terms of the collection, I would say that for me, a very important aspect, having inherited a collection that was acquired by men, is the female perspective, and acquiring works by female artists, women artists of the same generation, and also drawing the lines from the modern core of the collection and up to the contemporary. And then I would like to just finish to say that what Karen said initially is also this perspective and the topic of this conversation, which is how can a private collection become more than itself and engage in these types of public dialogues that we've been discussing.
Thank you, ladies. This was amazing. I'm sorry I ate all the time for questions, but I hope that you had a good time. And they're telling me that we can have 1 or 2 questions. That was not me. I stopped at 3030000. Okay, so if you have any questions to these amazing ladies that are going to bring in a tremendous, beautiful new perspective to sort of more traditionally based collections in this new world.
I have some questions. Can I ask them all? The first one is, I had a teacher who said the levels of business people is little, medium, big, great, and the ones with foundations and non-profit organizations. Do you believe that an entrepreneur could do something, a little entrepreneur could do something interesting for art, or you need to be a big business person?
I don't think that it's a question about how much money you have to create an institution. It's about the ideas that you want to put on the table. I mean, it's like just depend. There are like amazing curators that just work with very young artists, and they are supporting their careers with a very small gesture, just like lending works to a museum, like being, I don't know, putting like $1,000 for the publication, and very like you don't need like to bring like a big budget. Yeah. So I think
Very little goes a long way in the art world. Every effort counts.
exactly. I think it's not about that you need to be like super rich just to do something amazing, or that's something that can improve the art context of your region or your city.
Yeah, and I think here we're 3 curators dealing with object-based collections, where one person owns one thing or multiple. But as art changes, for instance, with digital art, the ways of collecting change, and sometimes with an NFT can be collected by a collective of people, and the support, trickles in to the artist from different parts. So there are many ways of supporting, and it has very little to do with the accumulation of capital.
Well, I agree that there's many ways to collect, and some of my favorite collections are not like big budget collections, but more like niche collections of mail art or things that are immaterial. And sometimes the whole becomes more significant than the individual components when you put together. It's not, you know, the value or the sort of step-in price of the single objects, but what you create as a whole in a collection.
Thank you very much, but we're taking time from the next conference.